everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Dark Art Society podcast. My name is Chet. I am your host, and this week we have a great interview with Alex Pardee, the amazing Alex Pardee. Such a great dude, great artist, funny guy, just an all-around cool dude. Love Alex. So that's coming up. It went really well. I've already recorded it, and so you're gonna enjoy it. Let's see what's been going on with me. Painted a bunch of mini paintings, sold those. I got to paint some more here. Did pretty well, so I'm going to do some more mini paintings. Getting orders out. I got one of my commissions done, which is great. Got that shipped and crossed off my list. I got to finish up another 2 that are almost done. I've got a ship painting for the Blab show I got to do. I got another commission I owe someone I got to start, and on and on and on. Yeah, so not too much exciting stuff. The usual. Anyway, this week's episode, as always, is sponsored by Skull Shop, SKULLSHOPPE. Here's one of their amazing skulls. If you join our Patreon at I think the $5 level, you get a 20%, I don't even remember now, 20% discount code, I think, or 20% discount code. If you want to support us, you go to patreon.com/darkartsociety, and you can support us for as little as $1. And you get entry in the private Facebook group and the Discord, and your name read on the air, which I'm about to do right now for new subscribers here. I can see them. Let's see. We've got, David Ellis. Thank you, David. Tentacled Space Dragon, 1991. Thank you. Andy Spade. Thank you, Andy. Let's see here. And that's it. Thank you for supporting. This is how I can afford to do this podcast. I really appreciate your support. If you want to support my work, you can go to patreon.com/Chetzar, and I'm posting everything I work on as I do it. And let's see. Oh, I got on Threads. Everyone's talking about Threads versus Twitter. I kind of like it. I'm not stoked on what Twitter's turned into. But I'm just at Chetzar, like I am everywhere. I feel like I'm missing something. I need to write a list of everything I'm supposed to say at the beginning of this show. It's only been like 5 or 6 years. I haven't managed to do that. I think that's everything. We'll see. I'll probably remember as soon as I'm done. Anyway, I got to get done with this because I have to get this thing posted. That's it. So I hope you enjoy my interview with the amazing Alex Pardee. Here we go. Hello, Alex.
Hello, Chet.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Are you in your fancy studio that's like 5 minutes from me that I've never seen?
I mean, I don't know if you'd call it fancy. I'm in a warehouse that behind me I put toys up, so it looks like I'm in somewhere that's not just a garage.
It looks very nice, but this is your place. That's. I mean, you're so close to me, right?
I know it's pretty ridiculous.
It's embarrassing.
It really is, but I mean, it just kind of goes to show you that I think that the older we get, the more just focused on work and hermiting out.
Oh yeah, totally, man. I know. It doesn't matter. It's same with I think David Mang. I had him on. It's like I think he's in your neighborhood too, I think.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's totally crazy. Anyway, so how are you doing?
I am doing good. I'm prepping for the illustrious Comic-Con, which will be my 23rd, which is almost
really 23rd.
Yeah, I started in 99 and I missed 1 year.
Oh my
So,
God.
I mean, not including COVID, I guess. So maybe like 22, whatever. But yeah. So I'm kind of in crunch time. I leave on Monday, so my place is in shambles, and
Oh man, I'm sorry. Sorry to ruin your flow. I didn't even.
Oh no. This is like I need the social interaction to keep going. Otherwise, I'm just like ripping my bald skin out of my hair since I have no hair left to rip out.
Yeah, that's this podcast is really my social life. Really, it's like I talk to someone I don't usually talk to once a week, and that's it, pretty much.
Yeah, it was fun. I had like a streaming show for a while, and it was really, really kind of beneficial and almost therapeutic to just kind of like, I would bring friends over and hang out and draw with them and stuff, and then interacting with the chat and stuff. Doing it live was a little bit stressful at sometimes because I ended up spending so much more time preparing than I wanted to.
Oh yeah.
But I had to kind of stop. But
well, yeah, I mean I've known you for a long time now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, my first, I don't know how we first got in touch with each other, but I know that I remember you sent me your comics, your Bunnywith comics, and I remember just like being like, holy shit, these are really funny, because I get sent a lot of stuff, and
I'm trying
it's
to
not
think
always it's not always great stuff. And then I saw and so when you get something that's like really good, you're like, oh shit, you know what I mean? It was like, this is really funny. This is really good.
It was always such a vulnerable state too, to like send people that I really admire stuff, especially when like it's hard to tell if you have similar sensibilities or something.
Right.
But it really is kind of like, I come from a really shy and recluse background, so sometimes like one of the reasons I created art was as a way to communicate.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
And I think that like that did kind of help build early friendships and stuff early on. But I think I'm trying to remember. I almost feel like we got introduced, or at least I got introduced to you with my very brief interaction with Cam DeLeon.
Oh, okay.
Like way back in, I think it was like 2001 or 2002, the toy company that I was working with was working on a toy with him. And I believe that's how I found out about you. And then almost the same year, Dave Correa was like obsessed with you as well. So, and he still is, which is great. So am I. So
he's coming on. He's coming on soon. I just got to schedule it. We already made plans for it.
Cool. So yeah, so I think we were definitely on around that same zeitgeist around the early 2000s.
Right. Yeah, and I know you and David and somebody came to my house.
Yeah.
You remember
that?
that?
We did. That was
when I was painting in the garage, when I had my studio set up in the garage.
And you tried to get me to sculpt. Well, you did get me to sculpt, and I failed miserably, which is fun.
I don't remember. All I remember is that I have that mask somewhere. Is I had this zombie mask that was all rotted and just basically hanging in pieces. It didn't even function as a mask. It had hair and just pieces. And there's a picture of us standing there, and you're wearing that mask, and it's like so disturbing because it doesn't look like you're a zombie guy. It's just like weird. It's like a guy with crazy hair and like strips of rotten flesh kind of hanging off his face.
Such a fun day. We filmed a lot of that in there too, which we never did anything with the footage, but I think we have that somewhere.
Oh wow, yeah. I remember you were shooting something. That would be good to unearth.
We had like a whole, like you were like one of the last stops. We had a whole countrywide kind of documentary / tour that we were doing at the time.
Oh, so, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So, I don't know your life story. So I want to hear, how did this all happen?
Well, when I was born, I was already 29. So now I feel really old. Wow, life story. I feel like
the art kid. Were you the art kid in school and all that stuff?
I was the scribble kid, if that makes sense. Like I wasn't actually interested or had any kind of realistic goal of wanting to be an artist or anything until I was like until I was a teenager. When I was like looking back on things like early on, like in school, like my sister and I would like dumpster dive and get Sunday comics and try to, redraw Garfield and Hagar and stuff. And I would do like caricatures of my friends in school in fourth grade, or make funny drawings of the teacher and get in trouble. But like, I wasn't really interested in it too much. Obviously I liked artistic things. Like I fell in love with Garbage Pail Kids and fell in love with EC comic reprints and fell in love with Todd McFarlane and these like weird HR Geiger stuff, like, but I wasn't ever really like thought that it was ever a reality that I could achieve anything like that. And it wasn't until it's always like such a weird thing to talk about, but like just not like weird. Anyways, when I was like 14, I got diagnosed with severe anxiety, depression, and panic disorder.
Oh, shit.
And back then it was like less diagnosed, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. That wasn't such a common thing back then. So you must have had it bad.
It was 89, 90. It happened because, well, there wasn't like a catalyst for it, which is really weird. Like there was no necessarily trigger, but once it did happen, like the reason I got kind of like so harshly, I got put in a mental hospital for a few weeks and stuff when I was 14. And so, but what happened was I all of a sudden just like slowly started feeling like I can't function in the world. Like I can't go to school. I can't do anything. And so I would go so far as to like, I would pretend to be sick for a week, and then my parents would be like, dude, you're not sick. Like they'd take me to the doctor and they'd be like, you're not sick, you're going to school. So then they would like take me to school. So then I started like making, like back then it was a lot easier to kind of like make like fake sick notes or something. I would like go home early after the first period every time, and then I would just like hide in the garage.
Oh my God, that's so sad.
And then one time, like my parents called the school and was like, hey, we need, our son's homework for the past 2 weeks. He's been out. And they were like, oh, he hasn't been here for months.
Oh my God. Wow.
And so then it was kind of like, okay, we got to like figure something out. And I, at the time I didn't understand what was going on. I still kind of, obviously don't, but I don't, especially now as I get older and I understand, like, I don't fault my parents for, I don't like say like my parents didn't throw me in the hospital. Like they took me They took me to a psychologist and we got, examined, and I did. The thing that was confusing was doing all these like kind of like psychological tests that I didn't know if they were right or wrong answers for, and didn't know what I was doing because there was no trigger. Like every doctor would be like, oh, like what happened at home? And I'm like, nothing. Like my parents are together. I've never abused.
Wow.
Like, like it's, so it was a weird thing. And it ultimately just, I don't know what kind of.
I wonder if there's like a history way back in your family or something, because it sounds like purely chemical, like some switch went off in your head for some reason.
Well, what's interesting, and this is not something that I found out until later in life, is that, and it's not 100% diagnosis this now, because I still struggle with it. It's never something that fully went away. I've kind of gone up and down with being able to control it, and I was medicated for a while, then I was off medication, this and that. Is my father has Tourette's syndrome.
Oh, interesting.
And his Tourette's syndrome didn't kick in until he was 14. And his is more of a physical tics and stuff like that. But there is a tie between Tourette's syndrome, OCD, and anxiety.
Yep.
And so like later in life, they kind of diagnosed me as like having like a minor form of Tourette's that could be tied to the anxiety triggers. But it's not something that's like treatable,
right?
Well, no, who knows?
Yeah. Wow. That's. But
that's actually what I guess what I was getting at was when I was in the hospital, is when I like, we could talk about the hospital all day. It's not important because there's some fucked up stuff in there for sure.
Right.
But like one of the things was like, I kept trying to find something that would escape. Like they had a basketball court. I would try to play basketball. They had these like arts and crafts things. I would like make leather bracelets or do this and whatever. And nothing was making me feel better until like the middle of the night one night. I just like took out napkins and I just started like scribbling and not paying attention. And then like little did I know, like 2 hours had passed and I felt fine. And I was like, okay, like whatever this is, this scribbling, like this is something I can focus on, and I'm just going to do it. And then like my dad brought in some like art instructional books for kids and stuff. And, I was doing like 5-year-old books when I was 14, and I was like, cool, let's do this.
That's cool.
And so I just kind of kept drawing from there. And I was just like, this is what I wanted. It wasn't even something I wanted to do. I was just like, this is something that I kind of like need to do in order to stay sane. So it still at that point wasn't a goal to do professionally, but it was just something that I knew that I needed to feel better.
Yeah. I could see that, like, it's using it therapeutically, making you feel better, and then you start associating that with enjoyment and feeling better, and it almost takes on a life of its own.
Exactly.
That's so cool for your parents to see you have gone. I know what it's like, to have kids and stuff. It's like having your kid having to put your kid in a mental hospital would be very difficult, and to have to go through that, and then to see you come out of it and become successful as an artist is kind of amazing. I mean, they must be so proud of you and happy that it turned out that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think they definitely are. Ultimately, like, my parents are great. They're super supportive. They always have been supportive. There was obviously like a long road, because like in the early 90s and stuff, like there wasn't a promise of a career as much as it is today. Right. There wasn't, outside of advertising or fine art museum curation or something, right? Like there wasn't, and so I, like, they did obviously often encourage me to kind of have backup plans and go to business school, be a lawyer, like that kind of stuff. And so there was a long time where I did kind of feel like I was disappointing them, but I think overall they knew that I'd be fine.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool, man. What a great story. That's a hero's journey there. And look at you now. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Antioch, California.
That's where
outside of San Francisco.
What? Sorry.
Well, it's like a small town outside of San Francisco.
And Dave's from there. Is Dave from there too?
Dave is from a little bit like closer to San Francisco. He's from, I want to say, Danville, San Ramon area.
Okay.
Yeah, which is kind of also in the same county technically.
Okay. So at what point did you? I mean, were the comics, the Bunnywith comics, was that the first kind of like big project you did as a professional artist, or how did you transition into making those? Because that's the first thing I know I saw you do from what I remember.
So I had once again everything that I've done, which is why like I'm still so DIY to this day, is because it was out of like fear of interaction with people and fear of rejection.
I can so relate to that.
And so like when I finally decided, like I think I was feeling a little bit better. I was like, all I wanted to do through high school was just get through high school. I was like, I don't care if I get all D's, like I just need to get through, like I'll be proud of myself. So I got through high school, and then I was like, I want to do something with art. So I worked retail, and I went to junior college, but I didn't go to junior college for art. I went for business to try to do backup stuff. But I was drawing nightly. And I was kind of like, oh, I want to be a comic book artist. Like that'd be awesome. So I started kind of like submitting art to all the places at the time, Marvel and DC and Dark Horse and Oni and Slave Labor and all these ones at the time. And every single one of them, rightfully so, because I didn't submit sequential work. I didn't submit like scripts. I didn't submit stuff that they had drawn already. Like I didn't submit the right things.
Yeah.
I just submitted stuff, and all the letters were like, basically like, you suck until further notice, like, call us back. And I was like, well, that sucks. And I was like, I don't want to like do typical like superhero stuff. And I had seen at that point, one of the things that got me to that point was seeing Sam Keith's The Max when I was at a pretty impressionable age, I think 15 or 16. And like seeing that something could be disguised as a comic book and a comic book superhero that was actually like a really human, emotional, depressive story. Like I just like really connected with that. And it was like the art was emotional and weird. And so I was like, I don't want to do traditional stuff. I want to do stuff like this. And then so I just didn't want to kind of keep going through those rejection cycles. So I just kind of like looked up what it took to publish my own stuff. And I couldn't find any information about it. So
this is like pre-internet too, right?
Not necessarily pre-internet. It was 95 about.
Okay.
So like I could go to the library and use it, or I could use it for 15 minutes at home or whatever, but there wasn't much information. So basically, like, I found in a newspaper ad, I found a co-op in Florida called Small Press Co-op, I think is what it was called. And they basically said, like, the ad was like, print your own comic book for $100. And I was like, all right, let's try this. And so, wait. So I'm sorry. Before even that, I was totally just like doing Kinko's stuff. Like I like was trying to like, I'll just make zines for my friends or whatever. And so like I did like, 3 or 4 books that were definitely not traditional comic books. They were more like personal journals with illustrations in them, kind of. Mm-hmm. And characters and monologues and short stories. And I did those kind of at Kinko's. And then I didn't even have my name on them. I would distribute them kind of like, I would go to the junior colleges and put them there. I would go to like tattoo shops and put them there. I'd go to Tower Records and put them in there just for free. Like just shove them on, and then eventually, like, I was pretty embarrassing's a weird word, but I was like pretty like just private with them. I didn't really want anybody to know that I was doing them. Mm-hmm. And then ultimately, like, one of my friends kind of convinced me, like, you should like get this printed and print more than 50 of them or something. I'm like, all right. So that's how I kind of found that co-op, and I ultimately just made up my own publisher, like pretended that I had a publisher, put a published by a thing on it, and got my first comic book, and that was in '97, and then that.
What was that comic?
It was called My Book of Colors, and all those stories were kind of like loosely themed around different colors.
Okay.
And I had originally printed each different page was on the color corresponding to the story, and they're not good, but it was fun, and it was a way to be creative and stuff.
Yeah.
And so what then happened, and so this is all still pre Bunnywith, is I once again like submitted these to like try to find a distributor, like, Diamond Comics, will you distribute it? Last Gasp, will you distribute it? Right. And everyone was just like, these aren't comic books, like, sorry, like, we're not doing it. I was like, okay. And then so I was like, well, how can I get around that? And I'm like, I'll just go to the stores myself. But I was like, I don't want to go to comic book stores. I'll go to like what stores that also like might like this. So I'll go to music stores and tattoo shops and stuff like that.
Smart.
And so I went basically like sent some of these comics to Tower Records and Tower magazines at the time. And I remember specifically the magazine buyer at the time, his name is Clinton Johns. And I called him, I sent them to him, and then I called him and I was like, hey, I dropped off these comic books. I just wanted to see if you guys wanted to buy any. And he looked at it, and it was all black and white. And he goes, it just looks like a coloring book. We don't do coloring books. And then, he said it looks like a comic, or we don't do comic books. And then at the time, graffiti was huge, and graffiti magazines were like so many of them in Tower Records. Mm-hmm. And so I corrected him and I said, it's not a comic book, it's a graffiti coloring book. He goes, it's a graffiti coloring book? Okay, cool, give me 100 of them. And I was like, all right, cool.
That's so great.
And so I got 100 of my comics in Tower Records, and I sent them to him. And then like literally the following week he called and he goes, I don't know what you got, but like we sold all of them. So can I have 1,000 of them? And I was like,
shit.
I was like, what? I was like, well, I need time to print those. So hold on. But yeah. And I just kind of like was like, cool. And then basically Tower Records from that point on became my distributor.
Wow.
So from 97 to 2001, they put out all of my comics that I did in all of their stores worldwide.
Wow. I had no idea. That's crazy.
And it was awesome. So like, and my I didn't have a website at the time, but my email was there, like guest book or whatever was there. And so I started getting feedback from places like, like Japan and stuff.
Shit.
And I was just like, this is so cool. Like what's going on? And then the books ended up doing so well that Tower had, and this is all due to this guy, Clint Johns, who was the head buyer at the time.
Wow.
And they had their own internal print shop because they printed all their own advertising for corporate stuff. All of it was in Sacramento. Mm-hmm. And they basically like were like, hey, like we'll become like your printer and publisher if you want to just like start doing everything through us. And I was just like, yeah, let's do it. So Tower Records, like basically became like, I didn't make any money from it.
That's what I was going to ask you, is like, you must have made a bunch of money, right?
I made $0, but it didn't matter. Like, because when Tower was buying them, it was like they would buy them only if the cover price could be under $3. And I was getting them printed for like, $1.50 a piece. And then they would buy them wholesale for $1.60.
So you were just making covering the cost.
It was basically just like, I was using it as advertisement. Mm-hmm. And then when they became the print shop, it was like they would basically just like print things as fronting me the printing costs, and then would take it back on the back end when they would buy them from me and sell them. So I would have like, a stack of books to take to comic books, shows or something, but I would never made any money off of it. And I did that for years.
Wow. Well, how are you making money?
I was working I ended up working for Tower. I moved out to Sacramento and I got a job at the Tower warehouse being in charge of international magazine returns, which meant that I spent my day sorting through all the weird porn magazines that they had at Tower Records that would get returned. That was my job. And then I would go home at night and draw weird comics, and then they would print them. And it was such a weird time, but like really cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. Wow. I mean, that's like you didn't have a weird lull period building your name up and stuff. It's just like you did this comic, and then boom, it's like you've got them all over the world.
Yeah, and it was weird because it was still like it didn't have an instant effect. It just like in my world of going from like trying to get 5 people to look at something to all of a sudden 1,000 people are looking at something, like that was huge for me.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And so like it felt very crazy, but there wasn't like it without any social media, without any kind of like big friend groups, without anything online. Like it didn't feel like anybody was even paying attention.
Wow.
So weird.
That's crazy. Okay, so what's the next step? What happened next? This is so interesting, really.
No, I'm glad if I'm talking too much, please let me know, because I haven't talked about a lot of this stuff in a long time. So
no, you're doing perfect.
Awesome. So the next step, which it kind of brings us to Bunnywith, is I was also still this was still 99, 2000, I think. And I was still convinced that I was never going to make any money in art. And so I was still going to I ultimately did 7 years of junior college from the Bay Area and out to Sacramento now where I lived. And so I was going to Sacramento City College, and my math teacher had this very inaudible, heavy accent. Mm-hmm. And so learning complicated math from somebody that has a very heavy accent, I would just zone out. I'm just like, I can't figure this.
Math is already bad enough.
Yeah, I was just like this stuff. So I started using that class, and I was angry. The teacher was kind of a dick too. So I was just kind of angry at this class. So I started drawing pictures of this teacher. I started scribbling pictures of this teacher with different ailments, right? Like I started drawing different ailments. And so it was this teacher has herpes, this teacher with this teacher with this. And it was making me laugh. And then that kind of trope of making something with something just to make myself laugh and continue this therapy was ultimately turned into this cute little bunny that I thought was funnier to do with. I'd take this cute bunny and arms off, and now it's Bunny with no arms, or Bunny with big brain, and so So I made this like little ash can zine for the Alternative Press Expo that I was just giving out for free. It was like a 10-page zine that had like, 50 or so of these shitty Bunnywith drawings. And I went there and I gave them out for free. And then I brought it in to work with me, and I passed one off to my boss, who was ultimately now this guy, Clint Johns. And he goes, "Oh, this is cool. What's this?" And I just completely had no intention of making it bigger than this little ashcan thing. And I was like, "Oh, that's my next comic." And he goes, "Cool, we'll take 1,000. When is it in? When are you doing?" And I was like, "What?" Like, all right, I guess I have to do it now. I was like, "Oh yeah, it'll be done in like a month." And then so I just like went home and was like, "All right, making this into like a big book." So
that's so cool.
So and I feel like every step of the way is kind of like, I have like big aspirations, but I treat them as a joke, and then the joke becomes serious, and then I go, "Oh, now it's time to like do this joke thing."
It's amazing. It's so perfect. It suits you. It seems kind of perfect for you,
right?
Because you're just...
I think that approach kind of continued the rest of my life. But so then kind of like there's one more thing to the Bunnywith thing, which is interesting, is once again, it was just this little joke that I started in my room. And this was still now over 20 years ago. And I took the first issue of Bunnywith that I got professionally printed, the Tower actually printed, and I took it down to Comic-Con in the year 2000. I was sharing a booth with this other horror company called Rotten Cotton.
I remember them.
Yeah, so they were from Antioch as well. So I was sharing a booth with them, and I had my Bunnywith comics and some of my other art. And I only brought 200 copies, which I thought I would never sell. At this point, I was selling maybe 20, 30 copies of a comic at an art show, at a comic book convention or something like that, mm-hmm. Right? Tower was still my main distribution, and nobody gave a shit in person, which is fine. And so I had this Bunnywith book, and this is like still like one of my favorite Comic-Con experiences. I think it was my second or third year, and I was there. And I sold a couple issues of Bunnywith, and then somebody would come back and go, "Hey, that Bunnywith book's really funny." And I was like, "Oh, thanks." And they'd be like, "I told my friend about it. He wants to buy one." I'm like, "Okay, cool." And I, the first couple of days I sold like, 40 or 50. And I was like, "Wow, this is crazy. Like, this is awesome. Like this is like the best day of my life." And then all of a sudden, like, celebrities started coming over.
Wow.
Like, and people that like I had like no idea how to communicate with, like the head of Nickelodeon's development came over and was like, "I got told about this Bunnywith book. I want to buy it. Let's talk about making it a cartoon." I was
Holy
like, "What
shit? Are you serious?"
Yeah, it was nuts. And then Keenan Ivory Wayans comes over and was like, "Hey, I heard about this weird bunny book. Like, what do you got here?" I was like, "Oh, like Rob Zombie came over, and I met Rob Zombie, and
wow.
like I have pictures with all these people because I'm just like have this huge smile on my face at the end. And then and there was one that I'll always regret for the rest of my life was Richard Taylor from Weta came over to get one, and like I knew about him from like I was obsessed with like Dead Alive and some of the stuff, Frighteners and stuff that Peter Jackson was doing. And I think Lord of the Rings had just got announced, and I don't think they were working on it quite yet, but maybe they were. But I knew who he was, and I called him Australian, and he got so annoyed that like he just turned around and walked away, and I always regret that for the rest of. I'm like, because I knew he was from New Zealand, but I was still just like in the heat of the moment. I forget. I made some kind of Australian joke and it was off color, and he walked away. And I was like, "Wait, I'm sorry." Okay.
You never talked to him again?
No.
It'd be funny to talk to him again and apologize.
I have an apology written. It's still in my back pocket. I carry it with me.
Wow.
But I ended up selling out of those books before Saturday, which was awesome. So
wow, man.
Yeah. And then it kind of, I got obsessed with kind of the Bunnywith arc for a minute, and then made toys and books, and did the thing again where like nobody would care to carry the toys. It was like, I feel like everything that I did wasn't necessarily pre-internet, but it was definitely, you had to do a lot harder research to figure out how to do.
Yeah.
Right?
for
Like
sure.
making a toy was nearly
Yeah.
impossible.
Yeah, how the hell did you figure that out?
It was through, like, once again, it was through connections that like Tower Records, the guy, like the toy department of Tower Records would
Oh,
go,
right.
I think you can like call this guy. Do you want to give this guy a call? So I still had to do the work.
Hmm.
But it was still like I had to figure it out and do the work and call, and stuff. But then, it was like, I think being naive in those situations and just kind of like having blind passion really helped, because I didn't know like what could go. I didn't know what was incorrect as far as like, etiquette, right? I didn't know it was in bad taste to just walk into someone's office and go, here, you want this? And I'm like, but now I'd get shot, right? And so like it was the same thing where like the Tower Records thing worked. So I was like, well, these are toys. Why not Spencer's Gifts at the time Spencer's was the mall shop. I was like, how can I get fucked up toys into the mall? And I was like, well, I'll just call Spencer and Hot Topic. And like Hot Topic was already at that point like blowing up so big that they were already like too corporate, but Spencer's was like a little bit sleazier. Mm-hmm. Like Spencer's was always like I don't care, like what, it's a bunny, it's got a dick on it, yeah, let's put it in the store. So I got this like deal with Spencer's pretty quickly.
Wow.
And it had all these like Bunnywith toys. And
did they buy up front from you, or did you?
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean they clearanced them out pretty quickly, so but they bought them for me, so I'm fine with that.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah,
amazing.
So, and I just continued that naivete for years.
Right, that's amazing. That must have been hard. Also, you mentioned that you're naturally a shy person, and I've talked about, because I was always the shyest kid that I knew growing up. I was always like painfully shy, and it's like whenever I had to do something I didn't want to do, like go for like when I got into effects, go for a job interview in effects, or even when I started painting and wanted to get into galleries, I would like have to force myself to go to openings and meet people and get in there. And it was like, I don't know, I guess it was so hard. It was so hard for me to do that, but I guess because I really wanted to make it happen, I wanted a job in effects really bad. I wanted to be in galleries. And so it was like I would, that's all I needed to get me over that hump, but it's still painful.
Oh my God. It
painful.
Never, I don't think it gets any better either. I mean, I'm the same way. One of the things that helped me and does help me to this day is a feeling of giving myself a purpose, or feeling like I have a purpose, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's, and I worked at KB Toys for 8 years through the 90s as well. As I was going to school and stuff. And when I started at KB Toys, I was probably the most shy. Like I was fresh out of the mental hospital, like barely had any friends in high school, like barely, like I was just like, this is terrifying. I'm working in a mall where there's everybody's my age and it's this weird mall rat. Like I don't have any friends here. This is crazy. But having having a counter in front of me and having a purpose to say hello to people, right? Like it's my job to say hello. So I'm going to work to be like, hello, how are you? Like, what can I help you with? Like that, having that kind of sense of purpose helped. And then like, once I left around the counter, I was just a miserable, shy wreck.
Yeah.
And I took that approach with the art, because one of the reasons I got into art originally was because of the privateness of it. I was attracted to this personal story that I could do, and this experience that I can, I really wanted to get into filmmaking when I was younger. I wanted to make movies so bad.
Here. Me too.
And it was a pretty apparent like no-go for me once I kind of like realized that like you literally need at least one other person. I mean, it's possible to set up a tripod and do all the acting, but like literally like you need at least one person to help. Yeah. And I was just like not talking to that person, not going to share my ideas with that person, not going to do whatever. So I'm not doing movies. And so I got into art, and then kind of simultaneously, it overlaps a little bit, but the first form of art that I got into was graffiti.
Hmm.
And that was because it was the most like it was so secretive that like you don't even use your name, right? You don't even like it
Right.
was just I just need to create something and I don't want anybody to see it. It'll get painted over tomorrow when the cops show up, like whatever.
Hmm.
And I'm just like, I just need the act of doing it. And then all of a sudden, as I started kind of doing my own self-publishing and stuff, like the internet did start kind of like picking up a little bit. And then there was like a pretty like I remember like I think like one of my first like interviews online for like Bleeding Cool magazine or something like it was something that was like an internet site in the early 2000s, and they asked for a picture like a headshot, and I was like, are you kidding me? Like this is, like I was offended. I was like, dude, like this is art. Like why do you don't need to see what I look like? Like what the fuck? And like, and I wasn't the most confident person with what I look like. So I'm just like, I'm not doing that. And then, and my friend at the time, one of my roommates was like, he was a business guy and he was going to school for business. And he was like, he like had like a serious conversation with me. And he's like, the world's changing. The internet is here. You need to start showing your face. It's okay.
Wow.
Like, need to do this and I was just like, fine, take a picture of it. And then it kind of like and then from there it kind of did start like kind of like being like, well, if I'm going to do conventions, I'm going to have to talk to people.
Right.
Or if I'm if I'm going to try to pitch a cartoon, I'm going to have to walk into a studio and say, this is what I want to do, and so I kind of like had to just bite the bullet.
Yeah.
And figure it out and be like, okay, this is the new world I'm choosing to live in.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's what, I know that was Cam's idea, Cam De Leon's idea with Happy Pencil. It's like, he didn't want to be he wanted to be totally behind the scenes, and Happy Pencil would kind of like be his brand. But, I was in a band too. I was like the front man, singer, lead guitar player for a band for
I don't think I knew that. That's awesome.
Years. Yeah. I was in a bunch of bands. And I was so shy, but it was like, and I think this goes back to childhood, being super, super shy kid, is that I felt like in the same way you're talking about having a purpose, like being a salesperson, you're able to deal with the shyness. For me, it was like the art or especially in the band, it's like, I was playing music that I believed in, and it was almost like a shield. Mm-hmm. And it's like the music is the focus. I can get behind this music. I felt like the music, or when I was a kid, like the picture is what people are going, oh, that's good. Yeah. And so it's almost like you're hiding behind that in a way. It's almost like a protective shield that allows you to, deal with the shyness. At least that's how it was with me, Yeah.
Yeah. That was one of the things that attracted me so much, was that like, I finally had going back to like sending you Bunnywith books, like I went through a stage like I really believed in kind of like my art speaking for me. Mm-hmm. And like I would try to send it out, like, and then once the internet did kind of hit it was the same thing where like I wasn't personally going out and being like, hello, my name is Alex Pardee, I'm an illustrator, you should hire me. It was more like, I'll find message boards of things that have similar interests, and I'll just put my artwork up there and go, what do you guys think? Like,
right.
And
pre-social media. I mean, this is what social media is now. It's
it was just forums. I'd find forums. I'd be like, oh, who likes Spawn comics? Cool. Let me go to that forum and put up some of my art there. And who likes horror movies? I'm going to go put some of this art. Smart. And what's funny is kind of like continuing on this kind of journey of like naivete and randomness. I was doing that pretty frequently, right? Like I wasn't getting paid jobs. I was doing, at this time, it was about 2002. I was living with Dave Correa in Walnut Creek. We had become pretty close at the time. And so I was living with him, and we were both just kind of trying to figure out what to do with art. And I was just relentlessly just spreading it on every forum I could find, and doing any kind of like local band flyer, band art, whatever I could find. Trade me for a jacket or a hamburger and I'm good, and I'll draw you whatever you want. And I had posted a bunch of my art on this Invader Zim forum, and I didn't know that this was what happened until later on. But what happened was I posted my art on there, and then a few weeks later, I got a call from Warner Brothers Records, and Warner Brothers called me and was like, "Hey, like, we represent this band called The Used, who I'd heard of." And I was like, and they were like, "We want you to work on their album." And I was like, "Well, what does that mean? Like, you want me to do a flyer? Cool, it's $40, you know, like, like fuck off, you know?" And they were like, "No, like we got you a plane ticket. We're flying you down to Burbank tomorrow, and we want you to." I was like, "You're doing what?" I was like so confused. And I was like, "Hey, Dave, I guess I'm flying to." Like, I'd only been in a plane one other time. I'd never done any kind of deals like this, and I was still getting stuff distributed through Tower at the time. They were still alive, but I was not working there.
Yeah, I remember you contacted me about that.
So that was the time. That was like the first, I think, communication that you and I might have had. Like, I was like, I think Dave put us directly in touch. It was through MySpace, I think, maybe even.
Right. Yeah, that sounds right.
And so I flew down to LA, had this crazy like Hollywood style meeting with this band that I had no idea what was going on. I have some scattered thoughts of what was going on at the time, but I just remember like flying down there being like, I don't know what I'm doing, and flying back home with a job as like art director. And I was like, okay, I guess I don't know what that entails, so I'm doing it.
Oh my God.
And then kind of like one of the first gigs was working on their was doing kind of like everything for their album, from the logo design to the album art and the layout and the graphics. And so that's when I called you. You were kind of the only other person that I knew to, you know, I at that point, I think Todd McFarlane had done something, but I obviously couldn't get a hold of him. So I was just like, what do I do? And you were very, very helpful, because you did give me a range of like, here's a low end range, here's a high end, and here's kind of like what my experience has been. Here's kind of some experiences that I know through Cam or through this, and you know, so it was very helpful, and because of that, it made the job worth it, I think, because of you. So
that's great.
Yeah, and then that became my job for 6 years.
What? What do you mean? Working with that band for 6 years? Is that what you're? I was like the art director of the band, kind of.
Yeah, I was basically their live-in and traveling creative director for 6 years.
Holy shit! I didn't know that.
So I did, through the course of 3 albums, 2 DVDs, 2 tours. I did almost everything visual that they had, from a little placard in Virgin Records to their merch to the backdrops of their tours and everything.
That must have been really fun. I mean, I don't know.
It was cool. It was awesome.
Yeah. It seems like it would be. Was the band cool and everything?
The band was incredible. I have very terrible experiences with the label.
Oh,
Especially not having any of that experience going into it.
Yeah.
And spending, you know, like the first couple of years were basically spent like getting a lot of advantage taken of in hindsight.
Oh, yeah.
But at the time, it was kind of like, it was a learning experience. I'm not bitter about any of the experiences that I had. But there was some stuff. I mean, like by the time I had, you know, the reason I kind of like stopped doing it, working with them, and it had nothing to do with the band itself. It was everything at once. It was like the labels were scrambling because people were downloading music. This was around 2008 or so, and they didn't know what to do about downloading. Budgets were being cut left and right. There was no budgets for art. Like the last album that I did was a 6-month process where I actually ended up losing a ton of money on it because long story short, I was fully in charge of almost everything they did. So I was in charge of pitching the budget to the record label. I was in charge of delegating all the tasks to it. I was in charge of getting all these things. So they had greenlit a certain budget for, you know, photography and makeup and this and art design and whatever. And then as we were working on it, I actually, for that, I was working on a big rubber head, like effect. So I was working with, do you know Mark Villalobos?
I know. I know the name. I'm not sure if I met him or not, but yeah,
his company. Yeah. Like I was working with him. And so like we had to work on these things, you know, months in advance. And so I was they had greenlit a certain budget. And goes back to like naive horror story stuff that I would never do again. And I would advise anybody to never do. But I was so excited about what I was doing at such a big budget that they greenlit me for this astronomical budget. And so I took out personal credit cards to get going on these. Like, I was like, no. They like, it's Warner Brothers. They have the money. They said that money. And so I would then in turn be like, go to Mark Villalobos and be like, how much is it going to cost for like 9 giant full walk around characters? And they're like, $80,000. And I'm like, done, like, let's do it. And I'm like taking out credit card after credit card to buy equipment and to give it. And then all of a sudden, like halfway, a month goes by and they go, hey, we took like 10% out of the budget. And I'm like, oh, that's fine. We'll use my own camera equipment. I won't rent this stuff. It's fine. We'll do that. And then like, they'd be like, hey, we just got word, like they axed 50% of the budget. And I'm like, 50%? Like what, we can't, like that's already done. And they're like, sorry, dude. Like, and so
should have taken out those credit cards. Sorry.
Yeah. So I ended up like basically like paying for a lot of that time.
That's painful.
I had to kind of like axe any fee that I would get for any design and like, make sure that everybody was paid. And
right.
So that I paid.
Well, I imagine prior to that, it was a good paying gig.
Yeah, it was great. And it was still, I mean, the experiences that I had was, it was awesome. Like
it's super reputable too. I mean, just as like something to put in your resume, so to speak, that you were the art director for this successful band. That's kind of a big deal,
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. And it got me other gigs too. I mean, I kind of became like a temporary art director for In Flames, and then I did a lot of like hip hop stuff. So it was cool.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, I've got a friend in the music industry once told me that he's like, record labels, it's like the mob. It's literally they're as corrupt as the mob. Yeah. And he would telling me these stories of artists getting ripped off. I mean, it's common knowledge now, I guess, that artists have been ripped off all throughout music history. But the examples he gave me were just like, holy shit, like ripping people off is part of the business model. Ripping artists off is part of the business model. So I can imagine, you as a babe in the woods.
Oh my God. I was like the lowest on the totem pole that really wanted to be higher. Like I was like, this, if I do this, I'm going to get up on the totem pole. I was like, people need art. They love art. Art's so important in the music. It's like, no, it's not. You're fine.
Oh man.
Yeah. Wow. And the band was like so supportive. I mean, I was even living with them during the last album I did with them, but there was only so much that they could do when they're signed to a label, that the label makes all the decisions.
Right.
So
right.
It was frustrating, but I also imagine it was frustrating for them as well,
Oh yeah. 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 I'm sure. Wow. So, okay. That's impressive. I didn't realize that was such, I did keep hearing your name alongside that band over the years. I didn't realize you were like the art director for them. That's pretty cool.
It was cool. I just finally got to see them again for the first time in 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Went down to Irvine and hung out and had like a little reunion, and that was really nice.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Okay. So what did you, after that ended, what did you do after that?
So after that was, basically, so I had kind of like, before that, I had kind of started my own publishing company and my own merch company. Like the way that kind of like my experience kind of went, and my kind of DIY aspect was that everything was kind of a reason, like I had to figure out how to build a website if I wanted anybody to see my art. And then I had to figure out how to do e-commerce if I wanted to sell a t-shirt. And I was like, well, I have to figure out how to make a t-shirt if I'm going to sell a t-shirt. Mm-hmm. So I kind of like kept doing those things. And then, kind of without really intentionally doing it, I had kind of an apparel and publishing company in the early 2000s that I did myself. And I was selling, my own comic books. I was finally doing kind of e-commerce stuff. So I was doing direct sales instead of depending on Tower Records. And then the used gig came up, and I just kind of couldn't handle it. It was just too much to do both. So I kind of let my personal stuff kind of get shoved under the rug. I was still doing personal art, and I was kind of getting more into occasionally doing group shows. Copro was one of the oldest ones that I would do, or like stuff. So it was cool that I was getting to have a little bit of like personal stuff in gallery shows at the time. And then kind of when the used stuff started dying down, I just kind of ended up going, well, now I have a little bit more knowledge of business. I have a little bit more knowledge of this. Like, what if we tried that again? And I ended up teaming up with some friends, and Dave Correa is included in that. And we started a merch and apparel company called Zero Friends.
Oh, that's right. Zero Friends. Duh. Yeah.
That was the Zero Friends arc was pretty much after that. So I had, it was that was also like, that was kind of like a really big highlight of my life as well, was this kind of arc where I finally had like, I was like, I want to create a collective. Like, it's not just going to be about me, but I want to include these other artists. I want Skinner involved. I want Crayola involved, and Dave involved, and these people that I'm friends with and have built relationships with. And I have the means to figure out how we can get art out there, and let's just do it and whatever. So I started this company and with some of my friends, and we, once again, were very naive about what a company entails,
Right.
like we just kind of like, we're like, what if we had what if we had like retail stores all around the country? And it was like, well, I'll go to New York and start one. I'll go to here and start one. And we would go to New York, and they'd be like, this is so expensive. And we're like, yeah, but it's going to be worth it, and so we were naively being like, let's do it. And it was all awesome because it was so exciting. And I was working with friends, but just kind of like in any kind of like, you've been in tons of bands. I imagine it's the same thing. Like, as we were all pretty young when that started, because it was all 2008 or so. It was like 15 years ago. And people start kind of like being like, oh, is this really what I want to do with my life? This like, oh, I'm going to go get married. I'm going to do this. And then we would end up kind of like, some people would, owners would leave, and then they'd get kind of replaced with just another friend instead of like a businessman, or something in that position. And so we kind of like, that started getting a little bit out of hand as far as like what, it just wasn't working as a business. It was just kind of like, we were still just kind of all friends, just willy-nilly running around and making art, which was amazing. But it kind of coincided with, we had that for another 6-7 years. And then that kind of coincided with Dave and I leaving the company. And then I moved to Florida.
Oh, right. That's right. How'd you end up moving to Florida?
So I moved to Florida because during, 2011 or so, I started dating my girlfriend, Chloe, who's incredible. And
she's awesome. She's so cool.
She's the best.
Yeah.
And I was never going to be anywhere without her, and I still wouldn't be. And she got a really, really good job as one of the head marketing photographers for Disney.
Oh, wow.
And so that was like one of her kind of like cool, and I was beyond impressed, because it was like she had just been freelance, and she was shooting, like Fashion Week in New York and stuff, like on her own, like just doing freelance stuff. And then all of a sudden Disney was like, hey, like, let's reach out. And at the time, Disney had only had one other female staff photographer in their whole kind of country. And so it was a pretty big deal. So she was like, the only thing is I have to like move out to Florida because it's in Florida. And I was like, that's okay. Like, like go check it out. And, if it works out, then I'll move out there. And so she went out there temporarily for like 6 months to kind of like start the job. And during that time is kind of when the Zero Friends thing was kind of like, so I was like, you know what, like the Zero Friends thing's not working. Like, I'm going to leave. I'm just going to go to Florida. So I went out to Florida and was basically a witness protection for 3 years.
How long were you there for?
For about 3 years.
3 years? Okay.
Yeah.
How'd you like it?
I haven't had much trauma in my life. I feel like that I don't necessarily, Florida it was such a weird time in my life, because I was like, I had just kind of dissolved a company that I had started. I had just with my creative friends. I had kind of like done this and like Chloe was starting this new career, and so she was traveling a lot. So I was out in Florida, and like I had never had any experience with Florida before, and so it was almost instantly was reverted back to like when I was 15 and 16, like just like okay, I guess I'm starting over again, right? Like completely, like creatively, like influence wise, friendship wise, like communication wise. I'm just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I had like such a bad taste in my mouth about like selling my own merch, so I just like didn't start that up again.
Oh, really?
I ended up kind of pivoting back into doing client work, and started working on movies that never got made and animated stuff that never got made, and did that for a while I was out there. And it did really feel like witness protection. Like Florida's crazy. Like especially we were in Orlando. And
that's where I worked. I went there for,
oh, you did?
Yeah, on the Swamp Thing cable series in the 90s.
Dude,
yeah. I went, and so we were out there for, I don't know, a couple months maybe during the summer. We had to shoot in the swamp. It was brutal, man. Brutal.
Yeah. It from somebody coming, like I had barely ever left California except to travel, and like it just, I had to lose, I think 30 pounds when I got there because it was just so hot and so like just insane.
Yeah, crazy.
And like the thing that the interesting thing that we found out about Orlando pretty quickly is that Orlando specifically is this very weird town that was kind of like a small valley town, right? It's in the center of Florida, so there's no oceans around it, like Florida. It's basically Fresno. It was just a town. And Disney came in, and Disney bought all this land up and was like, hey, we're going to make this huge world here. And so over the course of like 30 years, like Disney hired, I think it was like 60, 70,000 people around the Orlando area, but didn't necessarily treat them that well. So the people that lived there that worked for Disney hated Disney, and the people that lived there that didn't work for Disney also hated Disney because they ruined their town that they grew up in. So it was a very negative place.
Yeah.
Like everybody was just so on edge, and it was just a weird place.
Yeah. I definitely had, aside from the heat and stuff, there was definitely weird vibes, there was, I hate to say it because I'm sure there's amazing people from Florida, but it was like, kind of racist too. When I went down there, like on set, hearing locals say the N-word and stuff, like it was weird. It was like, I haven't heard that kind of talk since I was a little kid in the 70s and hearing my friend's drunk dad ranting or something,
I mean, it was shocking. Like I've always been fascinated with weird and bizarre stuff, like sideshow stuff and, weird things. So from a spectator point of view, there's some parts of Florida that I absolutely love. And like we would go down to like where the old, like, sideshow freaks would like, retire and stuff. And we go to like the museums, and we go to like, there's sorry, hey, Harvey, stop it.
We're dog friendly podcast. Don't worry.
Noises. He has a big thing about Florida. But there's a town that's like the most spiritual town in the world. Like, right, it's a town of psychics. So there's a bunch of weird like X-Factor.
Yeah. It's not like this racist hellhole. It's like it's a weird place. Yeah, and that's like one little aspect of it. But there's definitely like, it's weird. It's just strange. It's like a real weird mixture of things. And I met some amazing people down there too.
Oh, yeah, like it's even in Orlando, like so I ended up having some really, really good friends from there. Met some really, really good artists, and down in St. Petersburg made some of the best friends I had when I was there. And parts of it are really pretty, but like it was like shocking. Like I like going to like a flea market and seeing like that they're selling Ku Klux Klan robes.
Right.
It was like, what the fuck is going on? It was crazy.
I know. Well, we're on the West Coast, and the South is a different the South is a different place.
Yeah. I was like going to like, also like there's some indoor flea markets that they had there that just would have like an alligator ring in the middle, like that like kids could go up and like pet alligators, and you're like there's literally just like a chicken wire that you can reach your hand over and just like pet an alligator, and it's like there's like a kid holding a balloon and like going, "Hey mom, come here, there's an alligator."
That's
it's
insane.
Like, this is crazy. This is 2018. You know?
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that is kind of crazy. Yeah, it's funny because I never thought of Florida as the South for some reason. It just seemed kind of like its own thing, but it's like it's part of the South. I mean, and when you go there, you know, it's kind of apparent this is part of the South. But enough shitting on Florida. I like I said, there were some of the crew members we met were just great, amazing people, and like you said, like spiritual people too. There was like some amazing people there, but there's a weird vibe there for sure.
Yeah, I would want to go back and like I feel like there is a lot of stuff there that's like cool. And even when we were living there, there was started to be like more like, you know, like hipster coffee places and more liberal areas that were like, you know, cool. Like in Ybor City, we went to the Pride Parade there and it was awesome. You know, like there's some parts of it that are really cool, but it was just overall it was like very like it felt like we were kind of on edge.
Right. Yeah, and Orlando too is also totally different from other parts of Florida. Florida's like big and has a lot of different areas that are all totally have a different vibe from what I get.
But I also always like am appreciative of stuff like because I get inspiration from everywhere, you know, and like
for sure.
It feels like sometimes like at that point in my life, I might have needed some of that kind of like isolation and confusion and weirdness because like it kind of forced me to figure out what I wanted to do and what I wanted to do next. And some art that I'm really proud of came out of that time that I was there, you know?
That's cool. Yeah, I was happy. I was it's funny, even though we never see each other, I was like kind of bummed to hear that you were moving away all the way across the country. And then when I heard you were coming back or you had moved back, I was like, yes. Just knowing that you're nearby is
in 3 years.
I just want you to be nearby. I don't know why.
Yeah, no, it feels good knowing that you are just probably like, you know, less than an eighth of a tank away from me.
So, okay. And why did you end up coming back?
We came back because Florida was being very Florida to us. The housing laws there are very different, and we didn't ever owned our house. So the first place that we rented, the people that owned it like ended up like basically like the landlord's not responsible for anything in Florida apparently.
Oh, really?
So like we moved into this house and like all of a sudden it was like infested with termites, so like we had to take care of that and like and, you know, and then the plumbing was bad, so we had to replace the septic tank if we wanted plumbing, right? And so like stuff like that. So we ended up doing all this stuff and we dumped, you know, thousands of dollars that we didn't really have into like a rental property, and then they fucking hit us with like, hey, you have 30 days to move out. We're going to sell the house now.
That sucks.
We're like, what? Like, what are you doing? So
that's terrible.
So that was our first bad experience. Then the second one was that we were like, you know what? Let's just move into a brand new place like that. Like nothing will go wrong. We'll live in a brand new place to work on. So we moved into like the top floor of this like brand new apartment complex. And lo and behold, we started noticing that it was falling apart. And the balcony was kind of like slowly tilting, and at first they told us it was for water runoff, which sounded reasonable. It rained so much. Then it kept cracking the insides of our house, so they would come and like just patch up the insides. And
oh my god,
it's just settling. It's fine. And it started getting so bad that like when you would set something on the ground, it would just go down. And we were like, dude, this isn't safe. Like like we're on the top floor. Like this is crazy.
Right.
Like, you know, gaslighting wasn't as much of a term or a known term, but like I would go down and I would try to like help or like ask about it, or Chloe would go down and be like, hey, can we have somebody come look at our structural thing? And they'd be like, you're crazy. It's fine. You know,
oh my god,
I don't think it's fine. Like there's hurricanes and shit. Like what, you know, and then ultimately what happened was Chloe went to go teach at this art camp for about a week, and while she was there, and I didn't even have a chance to get a hold of her while she was there, um, the the uh, the county like basically came and condemned our building.
Whoa.
The county came and condemned our entire building overnight and basically gave us like 10 days to get out. And it was like, what? Like, I mean, okay, I don't even want to be here another day if the county's condemning this building, but also like, I don't know where I'm going to go.
Right.
And so like I was able to get a hold of Chloe, and I was able to tell her, and she was kind of like at a fork in the road with her job. And she's like, well, we should just like get out of here. Like, this is kind of our sign to like, I don't really know where my job is going and I don't know what's going on. So let's just like, maybe let's move. And so we were kind of like figuring out where to go. And she went into her work and was like, hey, I think like, our house is falling down. This is a sign we're going to get out of here. I don't think I can be at my job anymore. And they were like, well, if you move to LA, we'll just make your job there.
Oh, wow.
And so she's like, well, how are you going to do that? The department doesn't exist. And they're like, well, we have the internet. So you just go over there and figure it out, and we'll just hire you to do stuff from there. And,
that's excellent.
So that was like, the decision was kind of made for us because like, it was kind of like she wanted to go to New York. I kind of wanted to go back to the Bay, but then it was kind of like we both had mutual friends and things in LA that we could do. I was trying to do a lot of cartoon and movie stuff. So like LA made sense. So in like within that 10-day period, she stayed there and got a hotel, and I packed everything up and drove out to LA and tried to find a house while she was out there.
Wow. That's so crazy. Well, I'm glad you're back. You're back.
Cool.
One thing I don't want to forget about this. So this is kind of like shoehorning it in. But you're the only other person I know that listens to the H3 podcast.
You're the only other person that I know. Since I have found out with you, I have 2 other friends that are my age that also listen to it. So we actually all went to the show the other night, which was great.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. I was so happy to find that. It was like, it wound up on my YouTube feed, and it was like, oh man, this is like the Howard Stern show without the problematic stuff, kind of. Right. And without like the weird porn stuff that I was never really into the strippers and
I know I was
baloney at women's asses and stuff. I just was not into that sort of thing. Yeah. But it's like all the other aspects of it I thought were great, and I used to listen to that show a lot. And it's like it was so cool to discover that, and then like, I don't know, I'm old, so I feel weird kind of watching it because it's like they're so young. But
it's not like, but I feel like it's hard to, I mean, they're not young, right? They're mid-30s, so they're younger, but I think that their worldview is very similar, to
True.
What we're doing. And speaking of Florida's, that was a Florida find for me. So I discovered I discovered them when I had first moved to Florida. It kind of same thing, like popped up and like it feels weird to say, but I think that you can probably understand what I'm saying. But like, because it was so frequently broadcast and I was pretty instantly connected to it, like that crew was like my Florida friends.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't have really many friends in Florida. And so I just like would draw and paint and listen and work. And I kind of, they were there for my Florida journey. So.
Right. And you just recently met them for the first time. Was that the first time, or because I know you sold a painting to Ethan and Gila, right?
Yeah. When I sold that painting, that was the first time that we had met in person, but I had, it was weird. Like, it was almost like good kismet, which I feel like this is, I don't even know how this happened, but like separately, most of the crew had already kind of been following me.
Oh, cool.
Things. So like, I think like 2 years ago, like Dan and I, the producer Dan and I had said hi to each other online. And then I was actually internet friends with Cam, who's on the show, before he worked on the show. So when he worked on the show, it kind of gave me a little bit of a connection there. And then,
that's cool.
Hila was following me. So it was like, it kind of like all just kind of came together, and it was cool. And I kind of like I became friends with the Howard Stern show in its infancy, which is crazy.
Right.
Right? You know, like, it's so cool.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I'm like totally addicted to that show now. It's great. I love it. Um, yeah, that show you did was awesome. The show
Oh,
that I think they bought that. What was the name of that show?
The No Longers.
Yeah, that was a great show, man. How did that was like those were big pieces.
They were. Yeah.
I don't think I've ever painted anything as big as some of those pieces.
Yeah, so those pieces were all about like 5 foot by 6 foot. And it was really fun because at that time, and we haven't talked a lot about kind of like art stuff, but at that time I just got off of like a year and a half to 2 years of doing baseball cards. So I was working, even though I was, and they were all digital. So I was working ultimately at a canvas that was, this big. And so I just kind of like needed to do this.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
I didn't care if anybody bought anything. I just like, look at that.
I'm doing these little tiny 2x3-inch paintings.
So good though. Holy shit. Yeah.
They're kind of fun, but it is like really makes you want to go like that.
Dude, there's very few oil painters that make me like want to tackle that, because like I've been so intimidated. I've tried it a few times, but I haven't been passionate enough to give it a chance,
Right.
But every time I see one of your paintings, I'm like, no, this is the style I want to try,
Yeah, right.
It feels like yours feels like the way that I kind of create stuff, which is make a mess and then spend time cleaning up that mess until it's all.
Right. Yeah. You kind of start rough and loose and correct. It's like you're correcting until it looks finished,
Yeah.
But when you get some time, I would love to come down and show you some stuff if you want.
Dude, I would love that.
I started in acrylic. That my first paintings were acrylic, and for whatever reason, I was obsessed with learning oils, and so I figured out a workflow. And then I went back to mess around with acrylics again, because I'm agnostic on acrylic versus oil. It's like if the painting looks good, the painting looks good. And I couldn't deal with they dried too fast for me, because I was so used to having that blending time and stuff like that. But
do you even do acrylic underpaintings or anything anymore?
No, that's when I went back and I did a painting, like, because you can do acrylic up to a point and then finish off with oils too, and I did that, and I was like, man, it's cool that they dry so fast, but it's also not cool that they dry so fast on your palette. But I would love to come down and hang out sometime when things calm down for you. I'm always down for that.
I get to I have to move across the street next month.
Oh no, what happened? You have I'm
gonna have a new space.
Okay.
Which is fine. It's pretty much my choice. I lucked out. It's in kind of an industrial complex, so it's not a shared space, but there are definitely other businesses around me,
Right.
And I lucked out because there's just a guy that single-handedly runs like a shades and blind store, and then there's was just a cold storage place next door. So I was pretty much alone, and it was quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And the place that I share a wall with, they just moved out, and an exhaust company moved in.
Oh no.
And so it's like an 8-person machine shop that does exhaust, and they're just pounding. And
it's got to be loud
all day. And like, I'm lucked out now that they're not doing this. I was nervous because they were there this morning, but once that happened, it's only been a few weeks now, but I'm just like, this is not like working. So I just kind of reached out to my landlord. I was like, hey, do you have any other spots? And they were like, oh, the spot across the street is open. And I was like, all right, let's do it.
That's great. So,
we'll see. It's a little smaller, but I think it'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, I'm working in a bedroom, so Yeah, I don't want to keep you too long, but I wanted to talk a little bit
Yeah,
about.
I like talking to you, dude. Keep going.
Oh,
We're
okay,
good.
great, excellent. Because we didn't get into, like you said, we didn't get into the art stuff, and it's
I
like,
know. I hope nobody's just like, but they're like, we don't care about you. Like, just
no, no, it's interesting. Your story is totally interesting, and the way I conduct these interviews, I ask what I'm interested about, and I assume if I'm interested, probably other people will be interested too. So I just treat it as like we're talking anyway. You know what I'm saying?
right.
So, and people like it. So I think it's they want to know.
Shout out people.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I don't know. Talk about the evolution of your process and how you start. I know you started as a scribbler as a kid, and when you started doing these comics, you were doing, a lot of pen and ink stuff.
Yeah,
And
the pen and ink stuff is, I think that I never had any formal art training, which is I get there's good and bad stuff, right? Like it
right.
was like fine because my road ultimately led me where I am, so I'm proud of it. But it was a long, slow road.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I never went to school, so
Yeah, and one of the things that I I don't know if my road would have changed much, but one of the things that I do, wish I had gone to school for is confidence in techniques. Since I'd never, I learned, I taught myself what I could figure out.
right. Yeah, yeah.
And then I take what I could figure out and I adapt that to what I want to do.
Right, right. But that's how you get that's how you get your voice though.
Yeah, no,
You
no,
know what I mean?
I know, but it's like, but there's been plenty of times in my life where, oh shit, no one's buying art. I need to take a commercial gig, and this commercial gig would require something, and then I'd go, I don't have the confidence to
Oh,
do
I
it.
see. Right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's better to know more than to know less,
And
you know.
and and so I don't fully like regret not going to art school. Sometimes I'm curious about like if I had a little more technique, if I was more confident with my materials and stuff. But that being said, I am never even consistent with my materials. I'll play with latex paint and watch those drips. I'll play with acrylics and watercolors and charcoal, and then I'll be like, oh, that doesn't work, and but I do think that the one thing that is pretty consistent with my art is the line work.
Mhm.
I I think that's what ultimately got me into art originally. Like I still remember very specifically the same year, which was third grade, which was seeing, Santa Cruz skateboards and Garbage Pail Kids, and my dad got me some EC Comics Tales from the Crypt Reapers. And the combination of those three things, I still feel like represents the work that I do today.
Yeah.
And like the consistency that I was so attracted to was the expressiveness of the line, especially a lot of those old EC comics and
Yeah,
stuff.
absolutely.
And I just feel like that if there's any part of my work that I'm 100% confident in, it is the fact that like I can tie together anything with lines.
Right.
That whether that's considered art or not, I don't care. Like I know that I can make a mess look cool if I can contain it in lines.
Right, right.
And so uh, I like to deviate from that sometimes, and I like to make messy stuff and not incorporate lines and see how it's like to. But pretty consistently, I come back to being like, I don't know, I like the way it looks with lines.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's I think, every artist has that issue. Every artist is oriented a certain way, and we feel bad about the things we're not as good at.
yeah,
It's totally, I think because it's like I talk to so many artists, and it seems to be a very common thing. Like for me, I'm like, man, I wish I could do line stuff. I don't even think in terms of like solid colors and line work stuff. And cause I'm always like, oh God, it would be so much easier to do like graphics and shirts and,
right.
color separations and merchandise, and just getting your stuff on cool things, because I've got all these like subtle gradations, and I'm into that shit. It's
Yeah.
like I'm into, you know, cool
Yeah.
t-shirts and yeah, I grew up on that stuff. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, so it's like so I'm envious of that, I'm envious of that kind of line work. But what I really love about your work is like, since I first saw it in the 2000, when I first encountered your work, up to this show I went to where you what was the gallery?
So it was the gallery technically was a gallery called Building Bridges, but it was myself and Harmon Projects, which is also Spoke Art. We rented it out to them.
Oh, okay.
We just put it on ourselves.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, but from that whole time period, it's like I can tell, and every time I've seen your work in between, I can always tell it's yours, no matter what medium you're using. It's like I can always tell. It's like instantly. And
That's amazing and crazy because of the amount of art that's out there, So
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. And there's a lot of people that I see, that are also influenced by you too. But I can tell it's not you. I can tell it's not you.
It's funny. It's one of my things. Like sometimes I don't see it when people are be like, oh, this person seems like they're influenced by you or whatever. And some people are very awesome about it too. Like people will email me and they'll be like, hey, you've inspired me a lot. Check out my work. And it, it's similar, but you can tell that they are having their own voice.
Yes,
right? And
yeah.
it's really cool. But I think one of the things is when back in kind of the graffiti days, I remember there was this one of my friends who's now passed away, but he a lot of people would rip him off and people would be like, hey, this guy's like ripping you off. And he's like, no, he's not. He's just helping me get bigger. Like,
that's a good attitude.
They think of me, right? And I'm just like,
yeah, cool. That's a good attitude.
I'm not saying that doesn't apply to me. I'm just saying like that's how kind of like I've always looked at kind of like if anybody does do something similar, I'm like, that's fine with me. Like I didn't do it. So
right. Yeah. And it's complementary, and it's also a natural part of an artist's progression. I look back at my early stuff and it was Giger, it was Beksinski, totally. And I was aware of it. So it's like, I kept trying to get my own voice. And so there is like an early stage, especially you can see an artist where it's like who their influences were. And as long as they get out of that and go on to create their own voice, then it's all good as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. How in some ways having all this access to the world to share your art is positive, but also like it's such a like learning art and finding your own voice is such a vulnerable time in a career that like I think about it a lot. I'm like, when I was 14 and 15, if I was pressured to like share the art that I was clearly influenced by Sam Keith and Todd McFarlane and stuff, like if people would just like in the comments be like, get your own shit, looks like this guy, reminds me of this, like it would, like I feel like maybe it would have stopped me from moving on.
True. Yeah.
And so like I feel like it is really hard for a young artist to kind of take that criticism too,
Yeah, that's one of the many reasons I'm glad there was no social media when I was a kid.
Totally.
I think about all the stupid things I would have posted.
Oh my God.
Embarrassing things. Oh my God.
I think about that sometimes too. Like now, I think things would be fine because I never did anything like I never had a bad intention or a bad bone in my heart. But there was a time, when I was 16 and 17 and trying to get people's eyes on, like I liked doing shock humor and I liked doing shocking drawing and putting dicks on things and like, whatever. And like, I never did anything hateful. Like there was no swastikas, there was no anything like that, but there was definitely off color stuff. And it's like, I thought about reprinting some of my old comics and stuff. And I'm like, I feel like out of context, maybe some of these things would be weird now, like, I definitely don't have the same views as, a wannabe shocking 15-year-old had.
Yeah, totally.
And had no life experience and didn't know that like making a joke about cancer is bad.
Right. Or mental illness or, it's just, it's a different world. I've got this one painting that I did in, I don't remember, 2010 maybe, of it was a trip vision I had.
Okay.
When I was on mushrooms, I saw this vision, and it was called Nazi face. It just came to me, boom, like this image was given to me, Nazi face, and it was like a white guy, obviously, but like all kind of jacked, square jawed, buzz cut, and it had just a swastika in the face, like carved in and festering. And I posted that back when I made it, and
Right.
I just assumed everyone would be like, "Oh, that's a great anti-Nazi piece of art."
Right.
And there was people still that were like, "I'm not sure about this. Explain this." Like they thought I was pro-Nazi,
Right.
and I was like,
And you're like, all it takes is one Google search to see I am not pro-Nazi.
it's just to me too. It's like that. How could you read it any other way than anti-Nazi to me? But it even had like an asshole for a mouth. There was like a butthole for a mouth. It's like, come on, it's all spelled out for you. But you know, we have, especially I think having the influences we have with horror movies and stuff like that. I don't know if I bet you've had this experience, but I don't think twice about the stuff I'm painting. I think it just looks cool.
Yeah.
And liking other art that's horror oriented or dark or whatever. To me, it's just like, oh, that's cool. It makes me feel good. I love it. Makes me happy. And until you get like, I don't know, kind of a normal person's perspective on it, you don't realize that like, yeah, I kind of like stuff that, you know, most people think it's really strange and upsetting.
Yeah.
It's like we're oriented different, kind of. You know,
I don't flinch at pretty much anything. You know, and I especially, I like to think that I would have a good enough filter. I don't think I've ever intentionally drawn something that's bad. So like I don't, you know, like gory different or intentionally gory. So like, yeah, like when I'm drawing something, I don't filter myself, and I don't think I don't really flinch at other people too, because I can recognize that it's art. You know?
Yeah, right. Yeah. I guess not everybody can. I don't know. We just take it for granted, I think, especially with the weird stuff.
Yeah. I mean, the other day, it's funny, speaking of like H3 stuff, there's another artist named Meat Canyon who's kind of in that same, I don't know if you've seen his stuff. He does animations online that are incredibly funny and dark and all pop culture related. So almost anything that gets talked about on that show, like this guy also has animations similar.
Oh, cool.
I'll send you a link. He's great. He's awesome. But he released this series of trading cards, and one of them had this character that had like a prolapsed face. and I shared it on Instagram because I was just like, this is fucking hysterical. And like instantly it was like, whoa, dude, like, why are you posting that? That's like I'm like, I didn't even,
it didn't occur.
Didn't even occur to me that it was like something that that I was posting a prolapsed anus face on Instagram. I just thought it was funny. You know, like,
it's the funny thing about that whole prolapse on H3 with the Howie Mandel thing, and that's become this whole meme on there. I remember that picture.
Oh my God, me too. From like, yeah,
way back when I first got on the internet. It's probably like late 90s. It was one of those pictures that you would email a friend to freak them out.
Yep, it was rotten.com.
Yeah, rotten.com.
Like, there's like 4 or 5 like very distinct images from that time period that like, and it's funny because like, yeah, like when they first started talking about that, I wanted to like dive in there, and I was like, no, this is an older image. Like I've seen this.
Right, yeah. This is way back. It's got way.
This like, guy's dead now.
Yeah, right. Wow. Yeah, so I wanted to get a little bit too into your process for, you know, creating. It's like, how does it work for you? Are you? I'll say it's like I'm kind of a doodler. Like I don't think that much about what I want to do usually. It's not like I think of a theme and then I draw it. It's like I just let myself go. I do rough studies, just play like I used to. That's the idea. Is like play like I did when I was a kid, and I didn't think about it, and I didn't have to worry about coming up with a cool idea. It was just doing it for the pure joy of it. And then I'll kind of recognize something. Oh, that looks cool. And I kind of develop it. And that's how kind of my paintings develop. So what's your process for creating work? Cause you've definitely got more like humor and, I don't know, it's related to comics in a way where they're like, narrative. They're very narrative, and a lot of them. And so what's your process?
Yeah, so I'm very similar to you in a lot of aspects where I do basically it's a cloud approach, right? Like I'm obsessed with shape and composition for the most part, like usually first and foremost. So
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of scribble and doodle, and this is for my personal work. I'm like scribbling
Right.
and doodling, trying to find something as shape, and then one of the other things that I am confident in is that like about there's a moment in the scribbles where I can be like, I can make this scribble cool. I can turn it into
Right.
something. Right? Like I don't know what yet, but this shape looks cool enough for me to start to see something, and then I just kind of like now it's a little bit easier for me to do kind of almost everything I do starts on paper, but it's like very rough, like rough, like I mean, yeah, this doesn't even make sense, but I mean like rough, like that rough,
Right. Okay.
and then I'll usually like take a picture of that and just throw it on Photoshop, and that way I can not waste so much paper doing overlays and overlays.
Right.
I can just kind of like keep developing that sketch for a long time, and then from there, even if I want to do like a color comp scribble, I'll figure out kind of like the loose stuff digitally, and then I'll just be like, okay, cool. Like if this is for a big painting, I'll transfer it to a big painting, and then I'll just go nuts there, and everything's pretty loose until the final stages,
Mm-hmm.
Um, but with but and that even goes for something if I'm doing a narrative, like usually I'm a complete blank slate. One of the things that does frustrate me still with my process is that if I have an idea, it's 1,000 times more stressful to get that idea out.
Right. Right.
Like if I'm like, if I literally am like, man, it'd be cool to make a zombie football player. Like I've never drawn a football helmet. I've never drawn like never. I'm like now I'm like trying to look up like 80 different references, and I'm scribbling, and I'm just like, what is happening?
Right.
Doesn't look natural. Like this is dumb and whatever. But if I'm scribbling something and then like halfway through, I'm like, it kind of looks like a football helmet. Like that's cool. Oh, I'll make a cool, weird football story. Like, let me think about this now.
Right.
And it kind of comes to me. So then the narrative then kind of drives the second half of the painting.
Okay. Yeah. 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 That's
And
interesting.
so I think a lot of it, even with my storytelling, is just so just process based. Like it's hard for me to kind of think of something to draw and then draw it the way that I want to.
Yeah. I'm so the same way. It's like the sketching, doodling process is thinking for
Mm-hmm.
me. It's like I'm not a good thinker, I guess. Like it's not an intellectual process for me,
Right.
and it's like it's an intuitive process completely, because just like looking at a bunch of scribbles and having a feeling like I can develop this something in these scribbles is appealing to me, or it kind of looks,
Yeah.
it's almost like that kind of, I forget what it's called, but where you can see patterns and things and clouds and stuff. It's kind of that sort of thing,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And it's just always very intuitive, and I love that about it too. I like being able to access your subconscious in a way that I think most people don't have access to their subconscious in that way. It's like you're able to discover things about yourself that are deep
Yeah.
inside.
Yeah. I also kind of didn't realize that aspect too, because I never outright like, you know, purposely put my emotions into I never was like, like I'm going to make a painting about being depressed.
Right.
But over the years, I kind of realized that my kind of like subconsciously I was injecting my emotions into these things when people would have similar reactions to the emotions that I
Right.
have by looking at it. And
Right.
like, oh, that's crazy that you can see it. Like that guy's smiling, and they're like, yeah, but you can tell he's hiding that smile. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like, oh, okay, that's cool, that's interesting. So I kind of go with it now, but I still like don't necessarily consciously inject those.
Right. Yeah. I feel like that's our, as artists, it's kind of, at least as intuitive artists, that's sort of our superpower in a way, that it's so mysterious. It really is such a mysterious thing. And I'm sure, like looking through your whole body of work, there are these internal themes that you didn't intentionally do.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's like your community artist is like our way of communicating with people. It's a language we use to communicate with other people, right? But the artwork first is communicating with us. It's like this thing is talking to us through the artwork.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like it's trying to tell us something about ourselves. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, you won't listen to me. You won't listen to me for whatever reason.
Even look in the mirror.
So I'm gonna talk to you through your artwork. It's really just a trip, it's so mysterious and cool. I love it.
Do you find it, with you being kind of like also creative in music and stuff, do you find the music making process similar?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's the way I've never been a person that like can hear music. I've had that happen strangely later in life. I'll kind of hear something and think, oh, I'm going to make that into a song. But generally it was doodling on the guitar where you're just kind of going, and just start messing around. And then it's like, oh, that sounds like it could be cool. And then you just start playing it and then you see where it leads. It's exactly the same. It's a trip. Yeah.
I have zero music intuition, so I can't even imagine. Like, I've meeting people that write songs and play music. I'm just like, it's fascinating to me. It just feels like there's beautiful mind stuff going around in them all the time, and I'm just like, okay. But then I imagine they feel the same way.
Exactly. That's what I was gonna say. It's like that's one thing I was getting point I was making earlier when I was kind of saying we take these things for granted. It's like, we do it. We're creating art all the time. We totally take it for granted that people just understand. And to us, it's not that big of a deal. It's fun. It's what we do. It's who we are. But it's not like, it's not as, we know how it's done. So there's not that like separation between, I see artists. It's like, I kind of know what they're doing. And so there's not what am I trying to say? It's not like really shocking. It's like, we know how it's done. This is our job. This is what we do. For other people that don't paint or have never had any art training, it's like a miracle. Yeah. It's like, how the hell did they do that? That's insane. I can't even imagine how you would begin to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think creativity in general is looked at like that by some people. Like, for instance, like, I had a good friend who was like extremely intelligent, very, super brilliant, communicated well, all this awesome stuff, charismatic. And then, one day came to me and said, like, I want to make a Valentine's card for my girlfriend. Like, what should I do? And I'm like, what do you mean what should you do? Just like draw a heart and make it say I love you, whatever. He's like, I don't know what that means. Like, what do you mean? Like, help me think of what to say. Help me think of what to draw. Help me think of what to put out. And that's crazy. Like, you just can't think of anything.
I know, you think like a super intelligent person like that would think that way, but
but it's just a different way. But then at the same time, like, I get so hung up on creativity that I'm a mess in my real life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Trying, staying organized or keeping things clean. It's like, but I often wonder, a lot of people I look up to are really smart. Like, I really tend to look up to people that are highly intellectual and smart. And it's like, I think it's because I'm not that way. Because I'm not really an intellectual, It's like, I'm a creative person. I'm not a.
I think you can tell that you're smart, though.
Well, thank you, but I'm certainly not educated. I didn't go to college, and my brain works okay, but it's still, it's like, I'm not. I can tell that the way I think is different than most people.
I feel the same way. I think that I also come from a very studious family. My parents my mom's a teacher. My dad was a librarian for 40 years.
Oh wow.
My sister's a stenographer.
Yeah.
They've all grown up with books and books and books. And like, I was an avid reader when I was younger, but once I found art and film, it kind of, that became more of what I was attracted to. And, and I have these, like, my brilliant college family, and then I'm here feeling like the outcast of play Jeopardy with you guys, like, like
it's, but again, probably to them, it would be, it's amazing, they would have no idea how you're doing what you're doing. It's the same. It's that.
I'm like, Mom, go to Comic-Con and run my booth.
Okay, so seriously, I could keep going on, but I know you got a soggy sandwich waiting. But I'll just have to. Well, you can come on if you don't mind. We'll have you on again to talk
I would
more
love to be
because
on again.
there's.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys out there are cool with it, I'll come on again.
Oh yes, we do part twos often. But I do have to ask before you go
Yeah.
quickly. Horror movies. Horror movies you were raised on. You're a horror guy too.
Oh my God.
Another
Yeah.
way we connected.
Yeah,
What were you?
I probably love every movie that you've worked on.
Yeah, I worked on a lot in the '90s.
I know. I remember when I first found out that you worked on the Blob, and I was just like I was like blown away. I was like, stop. Like that's insane. And you know what's funny is was there a puppeteer on the Blob named Tony?
Tony Gardner was my boss.
Was Tony Gardner? Did he work on the Blob with you?
He was it was his
he was
shop.
the guy.
I was
Okay.
I was green. I was like, it was my first big job. I was like 19.
Okay, so Tony Gardner, I feel like I should know more about him now. But anyways, Tony Gardner ended up working with us on a short film.
Oh, no way.
And it was around that time that I found out that you had worked on the Blob. So everything was like blowing me away at the time, which he puppeted this little this shirt puppet that we made, and he helped puppet it and stuff. Which
that's cool.
He did it as like a favor to a friend that was working on it.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, no, I fell in love with horror at an early age, and I was raised on, the best and the worst 80s horror, and that's pretty much my genre.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you ever go?
Sorry, what's up?
No, I was going to say, do you go back to, like, the older I get, the more I go back further before movies of my era? Like, as I get older, I have more of an appreciation for older horror movies too.
Yeah, I think, what's interesting is I definitely go through phases of being like, oh, you know what, I haven't seen a lot of the Hammer horrors, I'll do that, or I haven't seen a lot of like the giallos, let me go through that, or luckily enough we live in LA, so occasionally they'll play some older stuff, and if I haven't, it's so much more effective in a theater than like trying to watch.
Yeah, totally.
But like I've also had this problem, and perhaps it's a bigger discussion because it might be a pandemic universal problem, but like I cannot pay attention to things right now. Like I'll try to like watch an older movie that I haven't seen, or even watch a newer movie that I haven't seen. I just can't pay attention. It's like making me crazy. I'm not absorbing things. It's like,
oh really?
Yeah,
I see.
I'll try to like listen to a podcast or listen to an audio tape. Like, and after 5 minutes, I'm just like, I didn't listen for I don't know what's going on.
Do you have ADHD?
I don't think that I do.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I have OCD tendencies, which I've been diagnosed with.
Yeah.
I've never really been dosed with like ADHD, but I definitely have had focus problems a lot lately. And even with my own art, I used to be able to just zone out, put on a movie, pay perfect attention, or what's going on, draw for 80 hours. and now it's like, I'll spend so much time trying to figure out what the fuck's on Netflix.
Oh man, this is me. This is
5 minutes go by, I'm painting, then I go, I didn't even pay attention.
Yeah.
I'll find something. And then I try to find something else, and then I go back for 5, and I'm like, never mind, turn off the TV, just paint.
Right.
And then I'm like, I'm hungry now, I'm gonna go eat. Like,
That's why
that's a pretty new problem for me, I think.
Right. Yeah, that's why I put on old things that I'm familiar with. So it's like, it doesn't matter if I miss out. It's more, but it's like I spend an inordinate amount of time being like, I got to find something I could just have on and leave on so I don't get disturbed and I can keep going. Right. Because at this point I have to have the movie on. It's weird. Yeah. Or I'll put on H3. It's like, it's funny because on the H3 days, I like to watch live on YouTube. My easel's here. My screen is right here. And so I'm painting and listening, watching, and that's kind of perfect. But I was diagnosed with OCD in the 90s. I definitely have that. I have it under control now, which is good. But I'm pretty sure I got ADHD, man. I just have never been diagnosed. Yeah. Because I just forget constantly. It's like so frustrating. It's so hard to just, keep anything in my head.
Yeah, I'm the same way, and I feel like, I don't know if it's an age thing. It's like, or something. I just like, because coincidentally, you know, when something like a pandemic happens over 2 years, you're also aging 2 years. So it could just be something like
True.
that.
Right.
But yeah, but like I used to, I'm so envious of my older self that would be able to absorb three things at once.
Right.
Everything else, and like you know, like every movie or music that I've listened to pre 2008, I can like recite. You know,
Right.
every movie that I've seen since then, like I don't even remember
It's
if I've
true. It's like even good movies, I
yeah.
watch them and I like movies that I liked. I can't remember them.
Yeah,
It's so
I just
weird.
saw into the what was the second one, Across the Spider-Verse. I loved it. Visual, everything was amazing about it. Had a great time watching it. I couldn't tell you what it's about. I forgot.
I wonder if
At the
it's
time, 5 minutes after I could, but now I forgot.
I wonder if it's there's just so much media everywhere. I
It
wonder if
might be.
that,
Yeah,
that has something to do with it. Damn.
yeah.
Well,
It's frustrating because
yeah.
I feel like disrespectful.
Yeah,
If
right.
I'm like, oh shit, did I not pay attention to somebody who just fucking poured their heart out on the screen?
Right.
You know? I just distracted in my brain, but yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't know. It is partially due with age. I think it's just like an overstimulation thing too. But okay, one last thing. What's your favorite? Do you have an all-time favorite horror movie
I have
or a few?
a 92. I have a 92 part horror favorite, which is Tales from the Crypt, the TV show.
Oh, okay, cool.
That's my absolute go-to. At any point, I could watch all of them or one of them. It's my favorite thing of all time. And but as far as movie goes, I have like a pretty like fluctuating list of top fives, kind of depending on the day, but they're all pretty much, you know, the standards. Like I think Creepshow is number one, which might be not quite of a standard, but that also fits
Yeah,
the script thing.
that's a great
And
movie. I love that movie.
so like you know, Nightmare on Elm Street, Evil Dead 2, Dead Alive, kind of like the fun, campy, gory ones.
Okay.
You know. So
Yeah, the classics. Those are good ones.
what about you?
Oh, I'm like, you know, I'm the original Night of the Living Dead, the black and white one, because I used to watch that when I was 5 years old on TV, and Dawn of the Dead
Of course.
is the
First exploding head I ever saw was
yes,
Dawn.
it was like shocking.
I remember the time, like that's what's crazy about being a kid and seeing stuff. Like I remember my parents were at a friend's house and had rented a VHS and all this stuff, and like I was at the friend's house, but we were supposed to be in the other room, and I had walked into the kitchen at the time that they shot that, and like I was just like, "What is happening?" The neck gets bit and stretched, and I'm
Oh
like,
my god, it's amazing.
"So cool!"
Yeah,
and they're
yeah.
like, "No way!"
That's one of the movies that made me get into like I have to know how to do this and got me on the track of learning makeup effects.
Awesome.
It was
Did
that
you ever
one.
get to Tom Savini or anything?
I never got to work with him. I never, it's like, it was always people, I ended up working with people who worked with him. I just never really, you know, there's a few people I never got to work with, but I met him. I've met him before and, but I never got to work with him. But that and The Howling, those two
Cool.
were like, makeup effects wise, were
Dude,
like,
the bubbling and the howling, that's another one that like there's so many vivid, disturbing memories as a kid of seeing these practical effects. You know, like I mean, both the Howling and American Werewolf for sure with those practical changes, but you know,
yeah, I love the dog smile on The Howling.
Yeah.
That big smile. That was Robo. Since like Robo Team was my guy. It's like his stuff was so extreme and weird. Like the Thing, of course, you know, was just like
100%. That's in my top five, I think.
yeah. It's so good. It's so good. All right, I'm gonna let you go eat your soggy sandwich. I really appreciate you taking the time. I like again, I could keep going with you for hours. So we'll just do it again. We'll schedule something. I don't know, in the near
we'll have soggy
future.
sandwiches together.
Yeah. And I thank you for coming on. It was really fun talking to you. It was awesome. Just the last thing we have to do is just to say goodbye to the audience because we do that every time. Just say goodbye to your own in your own way. Say goodbye to the audience.
Thank you guys very much for joining us and listening to the journey, however exciting or exhilarating or boring it was. I appreciate it. And I hope you have a lovely day and create as much as you can because it's very important to the rest of the world, especially when we're all dying of insanity.
Thank you, everybody.